What's happening? Jason Up Nudie's Revolution. Down here in the cave. Yeah, that's right. Right in front of the, let's get this adjusted right here. I don't like the way I'm looking. That's better. Now I look good. We're down here in the cave, and you know, I had to make a lot of space here. Move all this toy stuff over, all this Christmas present stuff. Because I felt, you know what, it's Saturday night. It's Saturday night. And that side of the room is a little out of commission right now. There's a giant box sitting on the couch over there. This time of year, this room doesn't do so well with the Christmas prep. But I thought, you know what? It's Saturday night. And what would I be doing 35 years ago on a Saturday night at age 11? If I wasn't out at the clubs, you know, if I wasn't getting digits, I'd be at home playing with my wrestling figures and watching as much wrestling on a Saturday that could possibly be. So I said, you know what? Let's bring back an old favorite. Yeah, let's bring back the memories of LJN play, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. And you can see that there's some space behind me. There's some empty spaces because I got some figures here down on the floor that I want to talk about with you. So tonight, I was thinking, you know, all right, what am I going to do? What am I going to talk about? Am I going to talk about, you know, we talked about where did I get all my figures. We talked about maybe when I got all my figures. And I said we were going to talk about memories of play. And that can be broken down into lots of different categories. Factions and supercards and just basic wake up on a Saturday morning and grab the LJNs and what am I doing with them? Am I just having a random match? So we're going to talk about all that throughout this series. But first I wanted to talk about the champions. That's right, the champions. Now, creativity and imagination would allow us to have whoever we wanted be the world's champion or be the intercontinental champion. You know, if you wanted adorable Adrian Adonis up there to hold your world title, you could do it because it was your imagination, your federation. The LJNs came with championship belts. The only way that you were getting a plethora of belts was if you bought the tag team 2-packs. Because if you bought the tag team 2-packs, you were going to get what most of us used as the tag team titles, the brown strapped belts. Well, I also used the brown belt as the Intercontinental Championship as well. All right, and the only way you were getting these was through the tag team 2-packs. They didn't sell the brown belt on single card at all. So there's your brown belt. But your granddaddy of them all was your world title. That, of course, was on the black strap. And I'll tell you, even to have this today, and I have probably 4 or 5 of them today, and now with XOX I can have 150 black belts if I wanted. But just to have this now as an adult feels strange because this thing would disappear from my life within hours of having it. And once you lost this belt, you weren't getting it back because the only way you were getting it was by buying Hulk Hogan. And if you've already got a Hulk Hogan, it's not 2022, kids. It's 1985. If you've already got a Hulk Hogan, you're not getting another one just because you lost the belt. Okay, so you had to be a little creative if you were a moron like me and your house ate your toys. Okay, because my house often ate wrestling-related accessories. Hillbilly's hat, Nikolai's hat, JYD's chain, gone. Okay, and I can't get mad at my kids today when I buy them an AEW figure and within minutes the coat is missing, or the one of the accessories is. I can't be mad at them. I can't be mad at them because houses eat toys, and that's just what I have come to accept. Okay. So if you had the championship belt, you would have champions. If you didn't, like I, several times, you had to improvise, and you had to use other stuff. And there was plenty of other stuff around the house that I would use as a championship belt. Watches. Watches make for a fantastic championship belt. In fact, my dad had obviously watch. I mean, an LJN belt is almost the size of like a women's watch, like a real thin strapped watch. But dads had watches back then that were big. They were big belts, right? They were big straps. And so I would use my dad's watch as an LJN belt when I lost my belts. All right, so you got the black and the brown belts. Like I said, the brown belts were the tag team belts, but I also used them as the Intercontinental title. I never customized a belt. I never, painted a strap or something to make it look different. I never did any of that. It was brown belts were Intercontinental, and brown belts were tag, and black belt was world. That's it. Nothing else to say about that. All right, my champions. While I was creative with factions, which we'll get into at another time, and while I was creative with renaming wrestlers and giving them new characters, which we'll get into at another time, okay, Jukin Yard Dog, that's right, Junkyard Dog's twin brother, tag team partner, Jukin Yard Dog. We'll get into that at another time. Although I was good and creative at those things, I never got too wild and creative with champions because it just, to me, it never felt right. Okay, it never felt right to have Don Morocco as the world champion. It just didn't. So for my world champions, I really stuck with Hulk Hogan for most of play. Really. I mean, look, I was not the kind of kid that, would boo the good guys and cheer the bad guys and, oh, I hate Hulk Hogan. And, I was never that. I was easy. I was an easy mark, right? So Hulk Hogan, even, with play, seemed like that was the guy that should be your champion. And I like good guy champions because then, he can knock back, you can build up a challenger, right? Like a King Kong Bundy, or whatever. You can build up the challenger, and then, the challenger can hurt the champion, and attack him and set the stage for the main event. And then, obviously, Hogan could overcome, and it didn't feel weird because that's what was happening in real life wrestling. So Hogan was always my champion. Other people certainly held the world title. Randy Savage absolutely was a world champion throughout LJN play. And I will tell you that Ricky Steamboat was a world champion throughout LJN play, as was Terry Funk. And we've all heard that story over and over again. And I'll get more into that. I'll revisit that when I do factions and things like that. But Terry Funk was elevated to main event status when I was a kid. The most creative I was when it came to a world champion was bringing back Bruno Sammartino and turning him bad and having him defeat Hulk Hogan soundly for the world title. Okay. In what I would have to go back, because I remember, and I've told, this is all stuff you've heard, but I wanted to talk about LJNs tonight. I remember bragging to my best pal that I just had a 1-hour match between Hogan and Bruno, because a 1-hour match back then was like over the moon. right? That's a ridiculous match. Whenever the announcers would say, this match with a 1 hour time limit, it would pop the crowd, right? I'm watching house shows. It pops the crowd when the announcer says this match has a 1 hour time limit. Like, we freak out thinking that, oh my God, we're going to get a 1 hour match, and then all the other matches too, so like this card has got to go to like 4 in the morning. But it never did. It always ended on time. Huh. I wonder how that happened. But Bruno, as a bad guy, took on Hogan and defeated him for the world title, pinned him clean. And then went on to have amazing matches with Randy Savage as well. Savage as good guy, Bruno as bad guy. And I think that these two traded the title back and forth a few times. Bruno versus Savage. But then, you know, Hogan would come back, and I think Hogan got his revenge on Bruno, got the belt back. Bruno then turned good again and got into it with Terry Funk, who ultimately retired Bruno Sammartino by killing him. Yeah. Bruno was pile-driven off the top of a steel cage onto the cement floor by Terry Funk, retiring Bruno Sammartino. Now, I cannot pretend to remember if I think I gave the belt to S.D. Jones, who was renamed Brickhouse Brown. I believe he had the belt for a little while. I know Terry Funk did. You know, I don't think like Hogan would ever lose to Stud or Orndorff or anything like that. You know, if it wasn't believable in real wrestling, it wasn't going to happen with my guys necessarily, unless, you know, you do the Bruno thing. But like so guys like Piper and Orndorff and Stud, they weren't beating Hogan. Now, I have to think that Hogan and Savage as bad guy, this is a fun LJN match. This is a classic LJN match that I would have. And I have to believe that Savage beat Hogan and had the belt at least once. I have to think that. So then we move on to the Intercontinental title, and that belt could get tossed around a little more believably than the world title. And so lots of people held the Intercontinental title, but it mainly went back and forth between Savage, Steamboat, and Santana. These three guys would often hold the Intercontinental belt because they're just the best guys to play with. And, you know, add Greg Valentine to that mix. But, like, you know, when we did the My Favorite LJN tournament, you know, we talked about how much play these guys got, how these figures were go-to figures. Because if you want to have a good match, you grab your old standby figures. So Savage, Intercontinental Champion many times. Santana, Intercontinental Champion many times. Steamboat would bounce back and forth between the world title picture and the Intercontinental title picture. Certainly Greg Valentine was a multi-time Intercontinental Champion and is one of the best figures ever. I believe, I can't remember, but I think Valentine like made it to my Final Four, right, with Terry Funk. And you know, again, there were some oddities as Intercontinental Champion. I think Corporal Kirshner held it when he was Corporal Mike Kirshner as a bad guy. I'm sure Brickhouse Brown had the Intercontinental title. I'm sure Don Morocco, acting as Mike Rotundo, I'm sure had it at some point. But consistent storyline mode, it was Savage, it was Santana, it was Steamboat, and it was Greg Valentine, you know, which is obviously not too different from real play. Also not too different from real play was the tag team title situation, right? I didn't fluctuate all that much. I didn't team up Hogan and Jimmy Snuka and give them the belts. Right? I didn't do that. I didn't put together weird tag teams other than Terry Funk and Cowboy Bob Orton. They, and I'll get into factions, they are my best ever creation. They are my most proud LJN moment. They were multi-time tag team champions. But look, I mean, the Bulldogs were always go-to champions, even though they were unusually smaller figures and, you know, couldn't really have, well, I mean, as a kid, who cares? But looking at them now, you know, they're small figures. So to go up against Valentine and Beefcake, I mean, they're getting dwarfed by them, but it didn't matter. So as with, you know, what was going on television, the British Bulldogs were multi-time tag team champions. Sheik and Volkov, multi-time tag team champions. Absolutely. Two of my favorite figures to play with as a kid was Sheik and Volkov. So fun to have them chasing the title. So fun to have them as a dominant tag team, but also fun to have them get beat up. You know, go up on a, you know, put together a weird supercard and have Hogan team up with, you know, I don't know, have Hogan team up with Tito to take on Sheik and Volkov, right? I loved that stuff. Loved doing that. These guys, multi-time tag team champions. Absolutely, again, two of my favorite figures to play with, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, multi-time tag team champions. Absolutely. Because it worked, and it was working on what was going on TV too. And then later on down the road, 87, the Hart Foundation. I think the Hart Foundation kind of dominated the tag team ranks after I got them. I did not push Brett singles until later. So in 87, because he didn't really flirt around with singles until WrestleMania 4 in 88. And so Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, long time runs as multiple runs as tag team champions. So fun. Did I have weird champions? Well, like I said, the Wild Desperados, the combination, any combination. I did the Freebird rule with Brickhouse Brown, S.D. Jones, Mike Rotundo, who's Don Morocco, and Corporal Kirshner. That was a odd three-man faction. And when they held the tag team titles, which they did multiple times, any two could defend it, which is cool. And that's probably it when it came to like weirdo tag teams. Yeah, definitely. I never had like Stud and Bundy. I never had them have the tag team belts because, you know, I don't know why. I just didn't. So that is the majority of what I can remember with my champions. Now, next time we'll talk either about the way I played or factions. And you're thinking, well, what do you mean the way you played? Well, that's where all the memories come from, is the actual play. You know, I had things I did. You know, I had supercards every day. You know, writing them down and coming up with stipulations for matches, and absolutely. So we'll talk about the way I played, and then we'll talk about factions as well. But that's the champions talk. There's my champions. There you go. Hope you enjoyed. I got to put all these guys back now. It's a Saturday night LJN night here in the cave, and that's it. I got to go. We'll talk to y'all later. Good night now.